Welcome to Morning Devotion with Ken Gurley. Devotions designed to inspire you on your daily walk with God. Here's your host, Ken Gurley.
Hey, good morning. Welcome this Thursday morning to just a great moment in morning devotion history. No, it's no pivotal occasion. No, it's not any great anniversary or anything. I'm just enthused about this morning, this Thursday, September 8th, and I just pray that you will be blessed because we're going to discuss the greatest thing in all of the world, and that is love. Agape love, the love of God. And I just pray this is a blessing to each and every one of you. I have a flight this morning. Men's meeting up in New England. Looking forward to being with those men up there in that district, the Connecticut district, and surrounding districts. And just pray traveling mercies. I am toward the end of this travel window that I have been in, an intense window. Just feel like I've been the steps ordered by the Lord. I felt traveling mercies, your prayers. So thank you for being a part of this today. So let me just dive right into this. Let love have the last word. Can you really control people's actions? I mean, we can't hardly control our own, much less those of other people. You can't really do much about how people treat you, how they react to you. What you can do is control your reaction to them. And how do you do that? It's the love of Christ that constrains us. It's make certain that you're living in the love of the Lord and that love always has the last word. And what word is that? Well, that's the word. Love's last word is what I want to share with you today. And I pray this will be a blessing to you and that you will grow from it and it will help you. And that is going to enable you to get through something in life that you're struggling with right now. How many of you know that most of our problems have at the root some sort of relationship, that there is a relation issue, and learning how to work through those issues? We know that the first and greatest commandment, we talked about it yesterday, is to love God with all. Well, the second commandment is likened to the first, and love your neighbor as yourself. And this is where love needs to have the last word. Have you ever wanted to talk with someone who always wanted the last word, Have you? They've always got to get that last word in. Always. Always got to get that final verbal jab in. Always got to turn that knife one last time. I can tell you, whoever that person is, they're not empowered by the love of God, not animated by the grace of God. Because when love has the last word, things change. Maybe there's someone on this devotion today as you're joining in, encouraging one another and just sharing your needs and sharing life together with our morning devotion family. Maybe there's someone here in this room, in this space, in this time that needs this. Maybe you're standing amidst ruins. Broken things are all about you. Broken health, broken trust, broken relationship. Someone may now be crying, if God is for us, can he give us some comforting word? Well, I've got one for you. It is love's last word. And you need to let love have the last word. Here's what I need you to do. I'm thankful for all of you that are in our YouTube family. If you're following us on YouTube, just subscribe to the page. If you're watching this on Facebook, go ahead and follow the page. And let's just build this family up. And let's close this year strong. What do you say? Let's close it strong. Let's see God do some things in our lives. So what is love's last word? If I look to the cross of Jesus Christ and I see love incarnate, for God so loved the world he gave, and I see the God who is love, who became flesh, and I witness him at Calvary. I hear the last word of love. Father, forgive them. Forgiveness is love's last word. What kind of word is that? Well, call it love in the face of sin. Call it love in action. The grace and will to accept forgiveness from the Lord, then share it with others. It's God's richest endowment. The gospel's most precious gift is to forgive. That's love's last word, and we need to let love have the last word. It's John who's called the disciple of love. First John is called the book of love, but wouldn't you know it? It was that fire-breathing apostle Paul who wrote the love chapter of the Bible, 1 Corinthians 13. You know, you've heard this all of your life. There's three basic words in the Greek for love. There's eros, which is erotic, passionate love. Phileo. And you add that to the word for man, anthropos. We have philanthropy. Add it to the word brother, and you get Philadelphia, brother's love and brotherly love, and so forth. But then there's that agape love, that grand word for love in the New Testament. It isn't just lust in disguise. It isn't just false emotions or temporary sympathy. God is agape. God is love. The word used by Paul in 1 Corinthians 13, translated charity in the King James Version, is agape. Agape. In chapter 8 of 1 Corinthians, Paul introduces us to this word when he makes a comparison that knowledge puffeth up. I like that. Knowledge puffeth up, but charity edifieth. One, you just swell, but the other, you can grow. Yes. Paul faced four groups in the church of Corinth, and we know those four groups. There were the worshipers that glorified solely in the fact that they could speak with tongues of men and of angels. In 1 Corinthians 13, we also find the second group, the prayers, who could pray the prayer of faith, and they could move mountains. Then there were the theologians and all knowledge. Then there were the workers, those who gave their bodies to be burned, gave everything they had to the poor. Paul said to those four groups, I've got something better. It's called charity, agape love. He, the one who could have been at home in any of those four groups. Worshipers, he said, I thank God I speak with tongues more than you all. Prayers, wow, Paul was the one who could pray the prayer of faith, and he saw amazing things happen. And then the theologians, I guess if you write half the New Testament, you'd qualify to be in that camp. Then workers, I mean, read Paul's resume. How many times he was beaten, stoned, left in the deep. Paul could have been the big fish in any one of those four groups. But he said, I want to show you a more excellent way. Keep your preference, but you need agape love. The love that knows no limits to its endurance. The love that knows no end to its trust. The love that never fades in hope. The love that can outlast anything. It is, in fact, the one thing that still stands when all else has fallen. Paul was saying, let love, nothing else, let love have the last word. It endures. It endures. We need to let love have the last word. I'm so impressed, and I've seen it in so many different situations, and I've been involved and watched from afar and a near. Is a near a word? Afar and a near. I think I just made up a word. I think I did. A near. I've watched from afar and a near as people who had every right in the world to be hurt, people who had every right in the world to be offended, people who had every right in the world to say, no, I've trusted you my last time. No. And I watched them rise up on the wings of love and offer that beautiful last word, forgiveness. Our relationship to the Lord is not academic. As we saw yesterday, thou shalt love the Lord with all thy heart. In other words, primarily our relationship with the Lord is a love affair. God so loved the world, he gave, and we loved him. We love him because the Bible says he first loved us. Then we're told if we love him, we keep his commandments. So our walk with God is not propelled long by fear, guilt, or condemnation. Some are saved through fear, yet fearing God is the beginning of the wisdom, not the end of it. There is no fear in love, John said, but perfect love casteth out all fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love. There must be a day in our lives. It may have been fear that brought you into this, but there must be a day in your life that you can honestly sing, 'twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieve. Why do we do this? Why do we do that? It's not a duty. It's a delight born of love. You read Solomon's song where the bridegroom and bride whisper words of love to each other. It was meant to show that love was the factor that brought God into our worlds. Love is the reason we will escape judgment someday. Love is the order of eternity. Are we in love with Jesus? And if we have been, he that is forgiven of much loveth much. And so when we forgive, we're acting in Christ's stead. And our forgiveness to others is love in action. Twice John said God is love, and both times it was connected to a responsibility on our part. In 1 John 4:8, he that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. Since God is love, we have a responsibility to love another. In verses 16 and 17 of the same book and chapter, God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him. Yes, herein is our love made perfect, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment. Since God is love, our love for others gives us boldness in the day of judgment. It was Simon Peter who would later say, above all things, have fervent charity among yourselves. For charity, agape love, shall cover the multitude of sins. So God's love to us requires that love that's been shed abroad in our hearts is designed to be shed abroad in others' hearts. And our love for others is largely revealed in that three-syllable word. The last word, love's last word, forgiveness. It was the late Russian author Leo Tolstoy. He's one of my favorite authors, but I will be very frank with you. His books are challenging. Whether it's War and Peace, or some of his shorter stories, Tolstoy credited God over and over for man's plight. One of his stories even used God in the title. And I love this story. God sees the truth, but waits. That's the title of Tolstoy's story. In that story, there's an innocent man accused of murder, condemned to exile in Siberia. 26 years the man lives in that barren, frozen wasteland, that desolation. No word from his loved ones, no word from his wife and kids. His hair turns white as snow. His beard grows long, thin, and gray. And all of his happiness went with it. He stooped, he walked slowly, spoke little, never laughed, but he often prayed. One day, a fresh load of inmates arrived, and in that batch was the man who had really committed the murder for which he had been accused and convicted. His heart was filled with bitterness when he identified that true murderer. I mean, after all, he'd been an innocent man. He'd been separated from those he loved. He tried to pray, as he had for 26 years, but he couldn't find peace. His hatred was so strong. It blinded him to the little things he'd grown to love in this strange, frozen world. He had a moment that he could have taken revenge on this man who caused him so much grief, but at that very moment, he saw the foolishness of his actions. And rather than his last word being one of revenge or retribution, love picked up a pen and added its final postscript, forgiven. When the real murderer realized he'd been forgiven for ruining this man's life, in the story, the murderer breaks down and begins to weep. He then goes on to confess to authorities that he had framed an innocent man. They would set that man free, but when the order for his release came through, he had already passed away. But in his death, for the first time in his captivity, there was a smile and a radiant peace that shone from the man. What are you saying, Pastor? I'm saying love had the last word. Don't you let the enemy get the last word. Don't you let hatred, anger, envy, and strife have the last word. Let love have the last word. This is something that goes beyond all systems of justice. Here is why a person who insists on exacting that pound of flesh from others, they're going to be a mistake. Here's the one that is constantly trying to bury the hatchet, not in dirt, but in someone's back. Never makes it out of their own blind alley. This is why a person who waits for, and I am sorry, please forgive me, will always come out on the short end of the stick. Here's why a person who says, I'm going to seek forgiveness even when I'm only barely responsible, always comes out the winner. Because the final word is love. My pastor used to teach that the first person who can humble themselves in a conflict always comes out the winner. Not that they're any more right or any less wrong than another person, but they recognize, but for the grace of God, I could do that. And they humble themselves. Let love have the last word. Let me give you a few thoughts about forgiving others. It's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. Forgiveness never totally makes up for the damage done. Remember Tolstoy's story that I just told, 26 years of exile. How can forgiveness make up for that? It really can't. In George Eliot's classic work, Adam Bede, when the main character hears that his daughter was molested, that man who had perpetrated this wrong sought the father's forgiveness. He said, well, I give you my forgiveness. But then he reminds the transgressor, but sir, there's sort of a damage that just can't be made up for. Things can be forgiven, but relationships can still bear scars. Don't ever fall prey to the notion that forgiveness will cancel all consequences. The results of our failures, can we speak from experience? They stay with us. Forgiveness shouldn't be exercised just to prove that some way you're superior. It's not deliberately taking the low road of false humility, using your example as forgiveness as a club against someone. True forgiveness doesn't mean that all those feelings are out of your heart yet. It does mean, however, that you have decided that you put an end to the matter and you're going to forge ahead. Some feelings are not cast from us. They are simply left behind us as we move down life's road. Here's what I love about forgiveness. It is the last word, which means that forgiveness writes a new ending to the story. When Judas kissed Jesus, Jesus looked into his eyes, saw that Satan had totally filled his heart, but love had the last word and called him friend. When the thief hung on the cross, one ended his life the way he had lived it, railing, cursing, hollering, but the other wanted a different ending. Yes, the other wanted a different ending. He rebuked the other thief and said, hey, don't you fear God? We did unjustly, and we're getting the due reward. This man's done nothing wrong. And then he said, Jesus, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said, verily, verily, I say unto you, today shalt thou be with me in paradise. Forgiveness writes a new ending. Forgiveness puts the peace of God on your doorstep. Can I just tell you something? Morning Devotion family, can I just tell you something right now? There is a high likelihood that if you're troubled in your spirit, that if you're perplexed right now, if there's something just digging at you and eating at you, It's a sure sign that love is needing to have the final word here. Forgiveness puts the peace of God at your doorstep. When you forgive others, God's peace guards your door. And forgiving others means that you've been forgiven. To speak forgiveness to others, it's just an echo. It's an echo of God's voice speaking forgiveness to you. In fact, to forgive others proves that you're working together with God. So when you think someone has written you off, write a different ending. When it feels like God is nowhere around, let love write a different ending. When you feel there's nothing to live for, let love pick up her pen and write a different ending. In my library, I have an interesting book by Clarence McCartney. Clarence McCartney pastored Pittsburgh Tabernacle. What was he known for? So many books. I think I have over 50 books that he wrote. But one of the books I have is entitled Men Who Missed It. The title comes from Stephen Douglas, Lincoln's opponent in the 1860 presidential election. Douglas lay dying, and he was heard to say, "I missed it. I missed it." And in the book, McCartney describes the lives of 14 men who missed the presidency. Some could have missed it, just sheer politics of it all. But there were some in a day when the press didn't wield the power it now does. These men missed it because of a character flaw. Like Horace Greeley, his resentment of William Seward caused him to miss it. Or James G. Blaine's public dressing down and ridicule of a man, going overboard in that, came back to haunt him in a presidential contest. Regardless of how you may have missed it, let love have the final word. Let it. I spent many years pastoring. And you can't spend many years pastoring without spending a lot of time in cemeteries, laying saints of God to rest. And I wander through cemeteries a lot, waiting for funeral parties to get there, waiting for things to happen. And I'm always intrigued with the epitaphs on the markers, the grave markers, the tombstones. If you walked into the catacombs below Rome, I've done that, you'd see tens of thousands of Christians' graves with all sorts of epitaphs, buried in hope, with Jesus, to rise again. One tombstone in New England simply read, "Forgiven, forgiven." That's a good last word. I've not exhausted love's mercy. It knows no limit to its endurance. I may have breached and broken faith and trust of others. I may have. But love knows no end to its trust. I may have struggled with darkness, but the light of love never fades. You may have carried a grudge for years. Love can pretty much outlast anything. I've stood on a belief for years that love will stand when all else has fallen. 1 Corinthians 13, love knows no limit to its endurance, no end to its trust, no fading of its hope. It can outlast anything. It is, in fact, the one thing that stands when all else has fallen. That's a Phillips translation. That's saying love is going to have the final word. Would you let love have the final word in your life today? Thank you. Say a prayer for me today. Grabbing a flight, quick trip to New England Men's Conference. May the Lord be with you. And let's see you. We'll see you again tomorrow morning. Share this with others. God bless.
Thank you for listening to Morning Devotion with Ken Gurley. Join us next time for another inspiring devotion. To support this ministry, please visit firstchurch.com/give.